Hello, my name is Josje. In this video I will show you how to make this trestle. For the studio workroom in my 12th scale canal house, I've made this work desk against the back wall. The desktop rests on 4 trestles, and I will show you how to make these trestles, along with some simple tricks and techniques to help you with the process. I'll be using my disc sander and table saw for this project, but you can also use simpler tools like the chopper or a hobby knife. And of course we'll be needing things like rulers, a pencil, tweezers, straight edge, clamps, sandpaper, the usual. I've made a cutting list for all the elements you need to cut. Here's a drawing of the trestle, and all this is for one trestle. So if you want to make 2, which you probably will because you'll need it, you have to double all these amounts. So 2 top beams, 8 legs, 4 shelf supports and 10 shelf slats. And as we're going to be cutting angles on the legs and on the shelf supports, it's helpful to cut these a little bit longer initially. So an extra centimeter should be enough. So that would be 66 millimeters and about 37 millimeters. If you want to make the trestle wider, so maybe your tabletop is just wider than this one, you can do so by just increasing the length of the top beam. So that length, just make it longer. And then also increase the length of the shelf slats, because if that's longer, then probably your legs will be further apart. So then the shelf slats have to be longer as well. So then these 2 will have to be longer. And if you're going to make this project, now is a good time to take a screenshot of the cutting list. I am using pine wood from the local DIY shop. You can use any kind of wood you like, really, if you have the right tools. But if you only have simple tools like a hobby knife, you could use balsa wood, because balsa wood is very soft and easy to cut. Here I've cut all the pieces to the sizes I need. And next I have to cut some angles on the legs and on the shelf supports, because as you can see the legs are at an angle. And that is 75 degrees. And we have to transfer that angle to the bottom of the legs and to the top and to the shelf supports on both sides. And I'll show you a fairly easy way to get those angles on those pieces. What I like to use is this geo set square, and you probably remember these from your school days, as they are used in geometry and technical drawing, and I use them a lot. One of the advantages, especially for this purpose, is that it has this, what is that called, radius on it with all the degrees, and we're going to use that today, and we're looking for 75 degrees, which is over here, and there's a little line, dotted line, and right there. So what I do is I draw a line down here, and then I pick a point on the line just over there, anywhere really, and on 0, and then we go up to 75 right there, and then connect the 2 marks, and there we are, and that is 75 degrees. And you may even be able to use your cutting mat for this, because as you can see on my cutting mat, it actually has the radius with the degrees on it as well. Now it's time to start cutting the legs, all 8 of them, and we'll be cutting them There we are. At a 75-degree angle at the bottom and the top, and both the bottom and the top cut are facing the same way, as opposed to the shelf support, which is going like that. Maybe you don't have a disc sander or a table saw, and you have something like that, a chopper. Now these don't come with miters, or well, they do come with miters, but not with 75-degree miters. So what I've done, I've cut one of those plastic gift cards you get, you know, those credit card type things, and I've cut those up. And actually for this you need a 15-degree, because this is 90 degrees, and then in order to get a 75-degree angle you need a 15-degree miter. And if you do the 75-degree miter you get a very sharp cut, and you don't want that on the legs, and you want a very shallow cut like that. To cut the miter gauge for the chopper, I'm going to draw a line here at 90 degrees to the baseline, and then it's divided into 75 degrees, and this would be 15 degrees. Now place the credit card along the vertical line and try to be precise, and then mark at the 15-degree line, top and bottom, and draw a line connecting those two marks. And then it's very easy to cut. And here I'm using my scalpel, or you can just use your hobby knife, and it's really fast. And I've just scored it, and then I can easily break it. And there you have it. I still have to set the miter gauge to 75 degrees for cutting the legs. And the miter gauge I use has a 75-degree setting, so that's very easy for me. But if you don't have that setting on your miter gauge, here is an easy way to set the angle. This is my disc sander, and I've put in the miter gauge, and I'm going to sand one end of the legs at a 75-degree angle. Of course, you can just use the table saw or the chopper for this, but I like to use the sander. The wood has a narrow side and a wider side, and the wider side was 4 millimeters and the narrow side was 2.5 millimeters. And we want the narrow side, the 2.5 millimeter side, we want that facing up. So we put that in there and turn on the disc sander. Sorry, that's going to be a bit noisy. And there we are. Perfect. And here's a little jig I made to cut all of the legs to the same length. And it's really simple. All it is a bit of leftover plywood from cutting windows in my doll's house, I believe. And I've glued some strips of wood on there at the 75-degree angle. Now you can do this on the disc sander and the chopper, but I'm going to show you on the table saw. I've inserted my miter gauge, which is still at 75 degrees, and then I'll take my little jig and I push it up against the miter gauge and against the saw blade. Then I insert one of the legs in there and push it up against there. I'm doing this one-handed, so it's a bit tricky. And if that's in there nice and tight, you can just slide it forward and cut it off. And here they all are, lined up and all exactly the same length. And again, if you don't have a table saw, you can make a similar cutting jig using the same type of credit card plastic as I used for the little miter gauge for the chopper. Or even strong cardboard or mat board would make a perfectly acceptable little jig like the one I made here. And it's the same as the wooden one. And this was actually made of the back of an old sketchbook. And the cardboard jig is a little bit more vulnerable than the plastic of the wooden one, so you have to be careful with it. But it does work. And with all of these, it is important to be precise when you are marking out and cutting the material. And then you'll have perfect jigs. I've now cut all of the legs and the shelf supports with the 75-degree angle on them. And as opposed to the legs where the angles were going in the same direction, on these shelf supports they're going in opposite directions. Like this. And when you're cutting them, the same as the legs, you want to have the narrow side facing up. So then you get the cut on the correct angle. The most difficult part is now finished, and that's getting the angles on the legs and on the shelf supports, but also getting them all the same length, which is not as easy as it looks. But it's all finished, and now we're ready to glue them all together. To make a very simple gluing jig for these trestles, I used a drawing I made earlier, and I drew another 75-degree line in the opposite direction, so that the two lines cross at the top. Make the drawing big enough so that you have plenty of room for your project to fit in there. Then I glued 2 strips of wood along the lines, making sure they touch at the top. To prevent the glue from sticking to the paper, I cut a little plastic insert from some leftover packaging to fit inside the jig. Now do a dry testing to see how the legs fit together. You could glue a strip of wood at the top of the legs across the jig. I did not, but I should have done that. And if you're happy with it all, then it's time to glue the trestles together. And don't forget to slide the plastic into place. Apply a bead of wood glue on both ends of the shelf supports and slide them into place. Do not use super glue, as you want to be able to move it around a little bit until it's perfect. And super glue does not let you break it apart easily if you need to. Make sure everything is straight and the legs are still even and that everything is how you want it to look. Then place something heavy on top and let it dry. After your first trestle leg has dried, it is a good idea to trace around it with a pencil. This gives you a good guide for the next 3 legs, as you want them all to be the same. And now glue the other legs together. The next step is to glue the shelf slats to the shelf supports. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Anyway, I like to lay the legs down and glue the 2 outer shelf slats first. When the glue has set a little bit, I transfer them to my gluing jig and glue the other leg in place. I made a tutorial for this gluing jig and I'll provide the link at the end of this video. Now, to keep everything straight, I push a straight edge against it all. And I put something on top of the slats as well to push it down. After it has dried, you can glue in the other slats. I start with the middle one and I position it by eye. Then I glue in the 2 other ones and position those by eye as well. Again, use wood glue for this and not super glue. At this stage, it is wise to clamp it to the side of the gluing jig again, like I did here, to assure everything dries straight and true. Check that both legs are the same height. I did that by placing a straight edge on the top beam and checking that edge against a straight edge alongside it, resting on the gluing jig. In my case, the top of the right leg needed a tiny bit of sanding. Then glue the top beam in place and you're ready for the stain or paint. I chose to spray paint the trestles black. And to make painting easier, I stuck them down onto a bit of plywood with some double-sided tape. Then I used 2 layers of grey undercoat and sanded in between each layer, and then I applied 2 layers of matte black paint, and again I sanded in between each layer. And here they are, finished! I think they look great in black, but white would look good too, or pink for a cute bedroom, or green for a greenhouse, or, well, you choose. Thank you for watching. Have fun!